conversation about the birds and the bees has always been an awkward one, let's be honest, whether you're the parent or the child. And when you throw in the idea of assisted reproduction into that, well, then things really become awkward. So you may be wondering, when do you teach your children about reproduction? Let's just have the conversation. What's up? I'm Corlandos Scott, and I'm an assisted reproduction attorney in Los Angeles. And that simply means that I've dedicated my practice to helping people grow their family through assisted reproduction. And in this episode, we're going to talk about when do you teach your children about reproduction, maybe even why you should teach your children about reproduction. And then we'll discuss some guidelines when teaching or explaining assisted reproduction to children. Let's just start by saying, can we use the phrase explain rather than teach? Because I think we're all lifelong students. And when we're talking about the birds and the bees, it's always been one of the most challenging, but honestly, one of the most important talks you can have with your children. And some parents never even think about crossing that bridge. Trust me, I have friends who are like, nah, not going there. And I get it. It's scary, and it's complicated, and it's awkward, and scary, and impossibly confusing, and scary, and all. Did I mention scary? I did, okay. Because for me it is. I have two little ones and I'm already thinking about dreading it because I know it's like a floodgate. You're opening their minds to so many questions that they either may or may not have had. But it's important to talk about and it's important to plan for. But in the context of what I do on a daily basis, which is assisted reproduction, that adds in another little word like surrogacy or egg donation. And the conversation really stretches another mile or two. So I know there's a number of intended parents who may be asking themselves questions like, how or do you explain to your child or your children that they're the result of a surrogacy journey or another third-party reproduction journey like sperm donation or egg donation or embryo donation? How do you explain that another lady carried and gave birth to them, or another person makes up part of their gene pool and part of it didn't come from you but from an anonymous stranger? Or as a surrogate, how do you explain to your own children that the baby in your tummy is not their little brother or sister? One of the unavoidable truths to assisted reproductive technologies is that ART puts donors, intended parents, surrogates, doctors, attorneys, agencies, case managers in the spotlight. And as much as all of those people are necessary to make the process happen, I think we would all agree that whatever we're doing, we have to always keep in mind the best interest of the child that's going to be born. So when you're thinking about keeping the best interest of the child in mind, it's interesting that you don't really find a lot of articles and a lot of studies and a plethora of information about how assisted reproductive technologies affects children in general. And I'm not only talking about the children born through assisted reproductive technologies, but what about the children that were part of the family before a set of parents entered into a surrogacy arrangement? I've had a number of clients who are intended parents who started the journey of growing their family and were able to get pregnant the conventional way, and then subsequently they needed to go through the route of surrogacy or egg donation. So what do you say to the existing child in the family about the process, and how do you explain that to them? It's interesting that there's not a lot of information out there, but there's some really cool studies and some really cool authors and mental health professionals that have dived deep into this subject. So I'm not even going to try to jump into a conversation about the general idea of the birds and the bees. I want to look at it from the perspective of assisted reproduction. So when we're talking about approaching the subject of reproduction to the children, what children are we talking about? Well, we're talking about donor-conceived children and surrogacy-born children. Throughout my time practicing assisted reproductive technologies law, I've seen the gamut. I've seen parents who were diametrically opposed to mentioning anything to their child about how the child came to be conceived. I also have had intended parents who say they were absolutely going to share that with their children. They even went as far as documenting the process and keeping a photo book of the little blastocysts and the ultrasounds and the agency appointments and all of that stuff because they wanted their child to know just how much effort, energy, and love went into bringing them into the world. Well, listen, I don't think there's a right or a wrong way for any particular person. I think everyone should have the right to raise their children the way they see best fit. However, there is some information that we can glean from some of the experts, mental health professionals, psychologists who have looked into this and done studies. And it may seem counterintuitive, but the studies show that it's beneficial to tell children about the way they were conceived when they were conceived through assisted reproduction as early as possible. Essentially, they're able to adjust to it easier the younger they are, as opposed to learning when they're a full-grown adult. So the studies have shown that between the ages of 5 and 10 are the best years for helping them understand the way that they were conceived, if that's a subject that you're going to broach with them. But they also advise not to wait long after 10 because you start to lose, but those 5 years between the ages of 5 and 10 seem to be the sweet spot. Well, what do you do if you have older children who you haven't broken the news to, or ones that were already around when the donor-born children or the surrogate-delivered children come into play? How do you factor them in? How do you bring them into the conversation? So we should also talk about the children who are older as well as the children who were already in the family structure when we brought in children via assisted reproduction. So with that, I'll say that if you've waited outside of the 5-year-old to 10-year-old window, it may not be ideal, but it's better than not sharing it with them. Studies have shown that children are more well-adjusted when they understand the process that their parents went through to bring them into the world. And that really speaks to the subject of why you should talk to your children about reproduction, specifically assisted reproduction, if that played a part in how they came into the world. Many psychologists believe or feel strongly about talking to their children about how they came to be. Not only is it being truthful and open with the child, but they believe that they have the right to know, and that knowing helps them adjust and become well-adjusted adults. An issue that many of my clients have asked me about, and of course I refer them to the mental health professionals, is, might my child love the donor more than me? Might my child want to go off on some wild goose chase, finding their donor or connecting with their surrogates, only to leave me, the parent, in the dark? And I will tell you what I have learned from the mental health professionals that I call friends in this industry. The answer is no. While there are many children that are born through assisted reproduction that would like more information about their donor, that would like to know about their surrogate, they understand, appreciate, and love the person who is their parent. For all intents and purposes, their legal parent and their parent in love. That's the person who they consider a parent, even though they may want to ask questions from the donor or may want to ask questions from the surrogate. So let's talk about some guidelines. If you want to speak with your children about how they were brought into the world, if it involved assisted reproduction, you may be wondering, okay, I'll do it, but how in the world, where do I start? Let's talk about it. But before we do me a favor and click the like button. Just let YouTube know that you like the video and they'll share it with more people, and then we can have a bigger conversation around this. I also want to hear from you. If you've considered talking to your children about assisted reproduction, or if you're wondering, or if you did and you have something to share, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Let me know what your experience is with telling your children or not telling your children that they were brought into the world with the help of assisted reproduction. So let's talk about some guidelines. Now, I wish there was some template we could use for talking about surrogacy with children, but sometimes we just have to have a little faith in children and just take the leap. One thing that I've learned in my short time as a parent, I do not confess to be an expert at all, is that my children understand a lot more than I give them credit for, which sometimes does scare me, but I keep that in mind to remember that it may be time to have a conversation with them before I actually think it's time to have a certain conversation with them. And how your child was brought into the world through assisted reproduction may be one of those things. Now, I will say, if we're talking about guidelines, one of the things that you can never go wrong doing is seeking the help, the guidance, the advice of a mental health professional. I know a number of amazing psychologists and mental health professionals who help parents, help donors, help surrogates sort through some of these issues on a daily basis. And they've done the research, they've done the work. So while we can talk about it in casual terms, they really have the science to back up what they're recommending. So if you're in the scenario where you're thinking about talking to your child about how they were born, if they were born through assisted reproductive technologies, definitely talk to the professionals in the mental health profession. But there are some things that I think we could probably all agree on that you don't need a fancy degree to figure out. Some things like talking to children about surrogacy or third-party reproduction, it probably won't be a one-time sit-down talk and then you're done. It'll probably be a continual, steady process, and it'll probably be something that you revisit on more than one occasion. Another thing that I think we can agree on is age. The age must be appropriate so that they don't get overwhelmed. Now, I think I agree with the experts between 5 and 10, but of course, you know your children better than anyone else. So use those as guidelines, but also use your own common judgment. I mean, after all, you're the amazing parent you are that fought so hard to grow your family and to have that child through assisted reproduction. I'm sure you're going to make a good judgment. Another one of the things that I think is pretty much a no-brainer is if you're having the conversation, to have it from a place of positivity, to have a positive and a special point of view, to let your child know that this was all an effort of love, which of course it was, but it's important to convey that in the communication. Another thing to keep in mind is this is communication. And when I say communication, I mean a back and forth. It's not a one-sided conversation that you're going to be having. So I encourage you to let it be a two-way communication. Let the children ask questions and make sure to answer the questions as best you can. I mean, keep it simple. It must be a two-way communication. And another piece of advice is really just keep it simple and honest. I mean, children are way smarter than we can ever imagine, but it doesn't have to be overly complicated and you don't have to really dig into the weeds. One of my favorite books on the subject is a children's book written by Abigail Glass called My Mom is a Surrogate. And of course, she wrote it from the perspective of a child whose mother is serving as someone's surrogate, but it's a beautiful, really simple, and really on-point book that just helped the children of a surrogate understand that mommy's carrying a baby for someone else, and that someone else is going to be lucky enough to take the baby home with them. And I remember reading that children's book to my daughter when she was 2 years old, and I asked her at the end, I was like, do you understand what a surrogate is? And of course, at 2, she doesn't really know, but she just recited back to me, she's going to make sure that the baby goes to those parents. And it can be just that simple. And while we're on the topic of surrogates and their children, one of the things that one of my surrogate clients told me was that she discussed her desire to be a surrogate with her children before she ever started the journey. And I thought that was an amazing thing to do. She essentially got the buy-in from her family because she knew that she was going to need their support throughout their journey. She didn't want to be pregnant with someone else's child and have her children resentful of it while she's walking around for 9 months carrying this baby. So it was just beautiful that she was able to speak to her children about the process and get their buy-in and get their support. And they were just as excited as she was on delivery day because mommy was giving this other family the gift of a child. The last no-brainer guideline, if you will, that I'll give you is just reinforcing your love. Just providing assurance or reassurance that the fact that they were born through assisted reproduction doesn't change your relationship at all. It doesn't change the love and care that you have for them. If anything, it speaks to how much love and care you have for them before they were even here. As the parent, you have the right to do whatever you want. And that includes deciding not to speak with your children about their birth being part of assisted reproduction. Well, if you do, just consider some of the possible consequences. You know, one of the things that comes to mind for me is the fact that, albeit your business, it's sometimes difficult to keep a secret. And if you're treating your child's birth like a secret, it could eventually come out in some shape, form, or fashion, and it would be more of a shocker than a open-ended conversation. And we all remember those crazy teenage years, right? Where everything was a crisis anyway. You can only imagine learning that you were born through assisted reproduction as a teenager or even older, and the type of response that you may get. Anything from rebelling to lashing out or whatever the case may be. It just may become more difficult to have the conversation if it's brought into your child's realm of thinking without your consent or without you leading the way. Another potential negative consequence of not speaking with your child about it is important medical information that they may need. So if your child was born with the help of a donor, it may be important down the line for your child to know that in order to address medical issues that he or she may have. And if they're an adult and they don't realize that they were conceived with the help of a donor and you're not around, they may never be able to reconcile or understand things that could help them address their medical issues or maintain good health. So if you can't tell, I definitely come down on the side of speaking to your children about how they came to be. I think that when you do that, you're going to find that you get their love and their support. I believe that the children who know this at an early age, they're well-adjusted, they're confident. I believe they have a healthy sense of identity. And above everything else, I believe it creates a trust in you as a parent that they know that you are willing to be there with them and share with them everything about your family and how you guys work together as a unit. So if you're watching and you're thinking, I kind of want to talk to my children about how they came to be, and it was as a result of assisted reproduction, and you're wondering, where do I start? Well, listen, I'm not the guy, but I know some people who can definitely help you with that. So reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you. So click the link below and you'll be taken to a personal chat with me where we can chat one-on-one. And if you have questions, I can answer them, or if I can't answer them, I can find someone or help you find someone who can help you answer those questions. So just click the link below, chat with me. I can't wait to talk to you.